Brilyn Hollyhand. He's a youth advisory council co-chair for the RNC, and Adam Mockler is a Gen Z influencer and YouTube star. Welcome to First Edition. I can't wait to hear what you have to think. What you think.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Happy Tuesday. We're almost like a Twitch just now. We'll get to that in a second. But the youngest generation of voters are growing up in a new era of media availability with a variety of new perspectives. So, Brilyn, how do you prioritize them? We've seen the Joe Rogan podcast. I just mentioned Twitch, but can you delve into how you're getting your news and how most of Gen Z is too?
Yeah, absolutely. When I joined the campaign as the RNC youth chair, there were two areas we wanted to focus on. One of those is podcasting, and we've had President Trump join countless podcasts, actually doing something that Kamala Harris can't, explaining his policies in depth and detail and defending his policies and his record. You saw him do a 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan this weekend while Kamala Harris was dodging the press. Those opportunities are where he can actually relate with Gen Z and connect with Gen Z on a deeper level. The second hand of that is the social media outreach. So there was a funny story about a year ago, this month, where I'm talking to President Trump, and I said, Mr. President, you've got to get on social media. And I said, you've got to get on TikTok. He said, actually, they tell me I'm on social media too much, sir. I'm tweeting too much. And I said, there's a difference between Twitter and social media. You need to be on TikTok. You got to be where Gen Z is. Since then, he started posting TikTok videos, and those short form content have been able to get his message out to millions of more Gen Z people. And TikTok says he has the fastest growing TikTok account. It's working. Gen Z is excited to hear from him. And there's a reason that Kamala Harris has the lowest poll numbers with Gen Z of any Democratic presidential candidate in modern history.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the future shapes out, because TikTok, I heard, is going away, but we'll see. But meanwhile, the Boston Globe, surveying more than 100 Gen Zers born between 1997 and 2012 about how they stay informed. Almost none of them say they read the print newspaper, and cited influencers, infographics, memes on TikTok, Instagram, and other feeds as their main source of news. So, Adam, how reliable is this, given that there are 41 million eligible Gen Zs to vote next week?
Yeah, listen, I think a lot of Gen Zers rely on digital media because it's easy to consume. It's easy to consume a 60-second clip of somebody that looks like you, somebody that's fun to listen to, rather than listening to Suits on CNN. So that's why you see a lot of people relying on digital media. You also see this mass migration of even older generations going to digital media. And as to how reliable it is, I think you need a healthy mix of different types of media. If you're only consuming TikTok, you're definitely missing a lot of stuff around the edges. But again, if you're only reading BBC articles, you're probably missing a lot of stuff around the perimeter as well. So to Gen Zers, I'd say try to have a healthy balance of what you consume. And yeah, it's really easy to consume TikToks, I feel like.
They are easy to consume, and I agree. I think if we are going to have TikToks, Republicans need to get on the platform. Brilyn, your thoughts on President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, though? He credited Barron for helping him get that Joe Rogan podcast. Compare that with Kamala's more low-key approach to the swing states. Newsmax even spoke to Trump supporters outside the rally, some as young as 14, who they can't even vote, of course. They say that their future depends on President Trump getting back to the Oval Office. What do you think about it?
Well, they're exactly right. And first of all, I'll say about Barron that he absolutely has been involved. He's been in conversations, and he's been a part of this strategy that we've implemented for the podcast and for the social media outreach. And why has that been so successful? Because Donald Trump actually has youth voters in his ear. He doesn't have these interns that are, old and decrepit and not really, in touch with Gen Z like Kamala Harris has. Clearly hers is inauthentic. Clearly Donald Trump's is working. Clearly Donald Trump is actually reaching out to the everyday youth voter, and it's working. It's proven effective. You talked about the 14-year-old being at that rally, and you talked about what's going on in Madison Square. The reason we saw that be so successful is because he's laying out a policy platform exactly what's affecting Gen Z. Gen Z voters don't care about all the buzz that we've been seeing the past few weeks. Gen Z voters genuinely care about that they can't afford a home, that they can't start a family, that they can't start a life living out the American dream in Kamala Harris's America today. Donald Trump can bring that back. He brought it back 4 years ago, and he can bring it back again, hopefully starting after next week's election. Gen Z wants that back, and that's why we're seeing 14-year-olds get in line at Madison Square Garden.
Interesting. So, Adam, obviously I'm in a suit, in a tie no less, right? But I'm on X, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, but I know I'm talking to Gen Z. You got to do more, right? The only Twitch I have is from my producer and TD, technical director. If I don't follow instructions, I get a twitch, right? Because they're going to be yelling at me. But here's the situation. What are these platforms, what have they been saying over or communicating over the last 30, 60, 90 days to people who consumes that information regarding the border, the economy, and so forth? What's actually coming across to you guys?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. First of all, I like your suit. I wasn't talking about you in particular. But also, I want to respond to something Brilyn said really quickly, because I was at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally. I go to these rallies, and I have very respectful conversations with Trump's biggest supporters. And there is one common theme among all of them, and it's that none of them can name a single economic policy from Trump. So when it comes to VP Harris, she has a housing plan for people like Brilyn and I, first-time homebuyers, so we get a tax incentive. When it comes to the child tax credit, a $6,000 child tax credit, not a giveaway, but an incentive for people to build families. Also, an incentive for small businesses to start up with a tax deduction. And I don't know if this is loud, but I'd like to pose the question to Brilyn. Can you name a single economic policy that Trump has for Gen Z? Just a single policy.
Well, first, let me say to that, why hasn't she done it? Why has she not encouraged?
She's not the president.
The president. Yeah, well, she has lunch with the president at least once a week, hopefully more than once a week, and she could be encouraging these policies. She hasn't done that.
She's not Biden.
She's been on an economic task force of the White House. We've seen none of this. She hasn't offered to fix the broken economy that her administration has put in place. But for the second thing on that, the policy that you're evading, that was her very first economic rollout, is this thing of price caps and price gouging when it comes to what we've seen at the gas stations. The last time that was implemented was by Jimmy Carter, who is arguably one of the most failed presidents in history in his time in office. When he did that, we saw long lines at the gas pumps. Our parents' and grandparents' generation remembers that. These policies that she's trying to put in place have been tried and have been failed. She clearly didn't, she slept through history class, because what she's trying to put in place isn't working again. So you're kind of cherry-picking policies that she's put out there as a response to failed policies. But my response quickly is just, why hasn't she tried to run on those policies when she ran as a presidential candidate in 2020 or when she was elected vice president that same year? It's pretty disappointing to see that.
Wow,
really quickly, I want to ask you one more time. Can you name a single policy? Can you name one single policy? Because you completely didn't answer my question. Is it the tariffs?
I think he did, actually, Adam. I think he named quite a number of policies.
But also,
just there.
President Trump has loved to put a small business administration together. He put that together for the first time, and he's made a very clear point that he's going to do that in his second administration.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because he's a businessman.
He's only referred to tariffs on Chinese exports, and by the way, price gouging laws exist in many states across the country.
Maybe you know what? I'm going to open up a TikTok account and so forth. I'm going to follow you. I want you to follow me back. I'll give you all the information you need. And you know what? I'll give you a preview right now. No tax on tips. No tax on overtime. And for your mama and your daddy, your grandparents, no tax on Social Security. So that's actually, when you look at it, President Trump is like Oprah. He's giving something to everyone, including you.
Why didn't he do that his first 4 years, though? Why didn't he already do that? I can put the same question
because
back
he
to
was actually creating a foundation.
In 2018, the largest tax cut in modern American history.
And he created such a good foundation that 92% of his advisors turned on him. All of his closest generals turned on him. He lost his vice president. What kind of person builds a foundation that they have to completely restart fresh their next administration? I mean, Brilyn, can you tell me why Mike Pence isn't his VP anymore?
Adam, I appreciate you asking the questions, but I'm going to take the reins back since we're the hosts. I have some questions here. Brilyn, in terms of the display we saw on Sunday with Tim Walz and AOC, what do you make of their back and forth on Twitch with Tim Walz saying that AOC could potentially be the Speaker of the House? Not to mention the fact that they did it on Sunday Night Football. I mean, how silly is that? They both lost in the game 0-0, which is much like Tim Walz when he tries to shoot birds. He's not able to do it. But curious to get your perspective. Is this a winning strategy to get to reach young voters as well as young men, which Kamala Harris has not been able to do?
It's not a winning strategy at all. And first, I'll say to Adam's point that in her 3.5 years as vice president, Kamala Harris has had over a 70% staff turnover, which is pretty disappointing as a vice president. So clearly her staff's not agreeing with her as well. As for what happened this weekend, we saw Tim Walz continue to be out of touch. We saw video game streaming instead of actually reaching out to Gen Z. We saw him making football references that weren't true. He said, we're going to run a pick six. You don't run a pick six. It's just not how that works. I was with Tommy Tuberville this weekend at a football game. I was sitting with him in a box, and Coach Tuberville looked at the video and goes, what in the world is this guy talking about? He wants to be vice president. He wants to reach out to Gen Z. He wants to reach these male voters, and he doesn't even know how to make football terms with football analogies, but allegedly he was his high school football coach. It's not really working. Again, they're continuing to be out of touch. They're wondering why it's not resonating with Gen Z. If anything, it's scaring Gen Z away because they're being so aggressive with their pushing, trying to get on Twitch. And if anything, if you need another reason not to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, simply refer to the fact that they said AOC would be their Speaker of the House. That's terrifying. That's frightening. Nobody wants AOC to be Speaker of the House, including Democrat leadership. That should give you a reason not to vote for him.
You know, Adam, the thing is, let's actually move off the shore of America and let's travel around the world. The reason why I say that is because when Trump was in office, we engaged in no new conflicts, no new wars. Under the current administration, one of which actually wants to receive a promotion to be president, under their collective watch, Biden and Harris, we're seeing conflict in the Middle East. I call it war, but they haven't officially declared war. And then you have Russia and Ukraine, and then you have China actually threatening Taiwan, and so many other things that are going on in the world. So how is that coming across Twitch and all these other social media platforms? And what are Gen Z, actually, how do they view it? How are they digesting the information and forming their opinions?
Yeah, listen, Putin went into Crimea in 2014 under Obama, and Obama should have been stronger, but then Trump had 4 years to take action. He did nothing. And then after the fact, now Donald Trump plays buddy-buddy with Putin, and his peace deal necessitates ceding Ukrainian land, which kicks the can down the road to another administration. And if Donald Trump cedes Ukrainian land, that in turn emboldens people like Xi Jinping to look at Taiwan and say, hey, if I go on a land grab, I can probably get a little bit of ground. Look at, they let Vlad get a little bit of land. And I want to back up for a second, because you guys said that Tim Walz and AOC completely lost their Madden video
Adam.
game.
You a moment ago. No, I'm not going to let him talk. I'm going to actually direct him back to my question.
I was
right?
trying to,
because you actually accused Brilyn of not answering the question. You sound
I
like
did answer
Kamala.
there. Yeah, for sure I answered there.
No, you sound like Kamala Harris. I'm asking, what does Gen Z think about Biden and Harris handling or lack thereof of all these conflicts around the world, and you pivoted to Trump, and he's not in office?
What do they think of Biden's handling? I think Gen Z has a diverse amount of views. You can't categorize them all into one group. So if you go on social media, it seems like a lot of Gen Zers are unhappy with the Biden administration's handling of the situation in Israel and Palestine. But if you actually poll Gen Zers, that's not very representative of us. A lot of us care more about the economy and care about housing than foreign policy. So don't get confused with TikTok and Twitter. It seems like Gen Z has an outsized representation of people who care about Palestine on those platforms. So I'd say largely foreign policy is not something we care about, but we'd much rather have somebody stable in office, not Donald Trump. And I do want to say, can I just answer this really quickly? When you guys said that Tim Walz and AOC lost in that Madden game, that's because they got distracted by Donald Trump's insane Madison Square Garden rally where they were making jokes about black people eating watermelons, calling Hillary Clinton the devil and the B word. And that's before Donald Trump even took the stage. They used all of this wild apocalyptic rhetoric. Maybe they got sidetracked.
Yeah, well, they're easily sidetracked. Even when in office and out of office, they're easily sidetracked by the
racist
lack
jokes,
of messaging, by the lack of policy, by the lack of vision. Brilyn, in your opinion, what is Gen Z? They're focused on Jay-Z. They should be focused on the economy. What is Gen Z focused on right now?
Well, I do want to point out that he did skip a few years in his timeline. He talked about 2014 and Obama, and then he skipped to Biden in 2020. He didn't mention the 4 years that Donald Trump was in office where Putin didn't invade Ukraine because we had a peace through strength policy. We reinvented this Reagan doctrine where we did not let people invade other countries, where we put peace through strength on the world stage. And it worked and it was effective. There was a reason, to John's point, that there were no new wars for 4 straight years. We have not seen that under a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration. As for what Gen Z cares about, I would say that we do care about foreign policy. Adam's trying to say we don't care about foreign policy, but I think as an 18-year-old, my peers and I do not want to go serve on the front lines for a proxy war of Kamala Harris. I think genuinely it boils down to that. I think at the end of the day, when Gen Z goes to the ballot box a week from today, we'll be thinking about housing prices, we'll be thinking about inflation, we'll be thinking about not being able to fill up our gas tank, not being able to attain the American dream, and the thoughts, the fear of having to fight on the front lines for Kamala Harris proxy war. That's what'll be going through our mind a week from today.
Awesome. So Adam Mockler, Brilyn Hollyhand, sorry. Thank you for joining First Edition. We appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, great
Thank you guys. That was fun.
Yes.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it. Get out and vote.
You got it.
All right, turning to this, coming up as